Welcome back, everybody, to Two Guys and a Stack of Comics. Just one guy for today. Wanted to come with this, talk about some breaking news out of New York Comic Con. Been a busier week for both myself and Mike, but wanted to jump on and kind of talk about this. And so, confirmation of kind of the worst kept secret in comics. The Ultimate Universe is wrapping up in 2026. It seems most of the series will end with issue 24. I think Ultimate Wolverine will end with issue 19, and this kind of end game event that they're doing for the Ultimate Universe, where the Maker returning, will in fact be the end of this universe. I think this is really shocking to hear, in that these have been such sales successes for Marvel. Ultimate Spider-Man became, kind of a touchstone book for comic book stores and for comic book fans, and it really ignited so many sales and so many people getting back into shops buying books. Even stuff like Ultimate Black Panther, Ultimate X-Men sold really, really well. The sales have dwindled a bit, but they're still up near the higher portion of the sales charts, which in a struggling comic book market, it is kind of surprising to see, a line like this come to an end. I kind of want to come at this from two perspectives and sort of talk about why I think this is both an awful thing, but I also think a good thing. And so I'll kind of start with the positive part of it first, where this could end up being a good thing. The Ultimate Universe, I'll say this, I'm still following three of the books. Amazing, Ultimate Spider-Man, Ultimate Wolverine, and Ultimate Black Panther. And I will say, I think, while I have had my issues with Ultimate Spider-Man, and I think the last three issues or so have been really difficult to kind of understand where the book is going and have been overly slow, I will say, while I have disliked it lately, it had such a strong start to it, and I think had so many good arcs at the beginning, that overall I can't say that series has been a negative. I do think as a reading experience it could have been better, but I do think overall it was a good thing. Ultimate Wolverine to me has been the best Wolverine comic book, man, probably in 10 or 12 years. And to be honest, it's been a while since we've had a great run on Logan. And so it's really cool to see that book and doing well. And I would say Ultimate Black Panther's been probably the best run in the last 10 or 15 years on that character. And again, maybe a low bar to clear for Black Panther, who has had, I think, some particularly awful runs of late. But you've had three really solid books. The Ultimates kind of lost me, but I know that has had a lot of fans. And Ultimate X-Men has been a weird book, but I think there's also a lot of Peach Momoko fans who like that as well. And so I think what the interesting thing with this is, with these books ending, where I do think this can be a positive thing. One of the hardest parts of comic books right now that we as fans experience as comic book fans is the endless nature of comic books, the endless nature of retcons and resets, and a lack of a commitment to permanent changes has massively affected I think, the fans' enjoyment of comic books. Now, some of that is because of the cyclical nature of the fact that there must always be a new issue of Spider-Man, a new issue of Superman, a new issue of Detective Comics, a new issue of Batman, etc. And so because of that, they're very resistant to long-term permanent changes. They're very resistant to taking things off the board for a long time. And that's understandable. I do think, especially in the last 20 years, that's gotten a lot worse. And I think if you look at where comic books were from, say, the 60s to the 90s, there was a lot of natural growth and progression that fans went with. It has felt like, especially in the last 10 to 12 years, it's just a constant reset button, kind of like an old school Sega Genesis or Nintendo game with no saves. And you hit that power button and it just puts you back at that first level. And while sometimes I think the stories can get so convoluted that might be necessary, I do think we have, because of the cyclical and continuing nature of these ongoing books that always have a new chapter, we've really lost the ability to tell self-contained stories. And so where I think the Ultimate Universe might be making a smart move here is, it might be better for it to just end where, hey, it was truly Jonathan Hickman's version of Spider-Man, Peach Momoko's version of X-Men, Dennis Camp's version of the Ultimates, Chris Condon and Brian Hill with Ultimate Wolverine, Ultimate Black Panther, where we don't have creative changes. We don't have someone who comes in and resets everything. That these stories can truly be that when you read them, they mattered, they happened, it was impactful. And I think you can sit there and that might help. And I think as a reader of it, while I am sad to see some of these books go, especially Ultimate Wolverine. I'd say Ultimate Black Panther, especially as well. It doesn't take away my enjoyment of these books, and it does make me appreciate them a little bit more. In that it will, I think, be runs that I revisit and kind of look at and say, okay, that was interesting, and those were good runs on the character. While I'm sure Marvel probably won't let these versions of the character die altogether, I do think it is a better fate for these things to end than to be endlessly rebooted or handed to a writer who maybe will come in and change what's worked on these. And I think when you hear Marvel talk about this, they've talked about how this was the original plan. It was only supposed to be 3 years and then kind of fold up shop. I do think it's better maybe that they actually do their original intended pitch as opposed to letting them carry on forever and eventually lose steam. And that's the interesting thing is that's what happened with the original Ultimate Universe, is that when you look at how the Ultimate Universe started in the early 2000s, really strong writers on a lot of the titles with really clear visions for those projects. They really created something unique and different and enjoyable. Those are the first 100 or so issues of Ultimate Spider-Man are just absolutely fantastic. And so much credit to Brian Michael Bendis for how he wrote those books. I think the Ultimates, had some interesting things, but they were really well written originally. And then as time went, they just made so many poorly thought out decisions or things that seemed to be aimed at shock value, or maybe the sales dipped a bit and it became, hey, let's take a swing at this weird storyline to get attention. And I do think it might be a better fate for this Ultimate Universe that they don't go through that period. That these titles truly get to get definitive endpoints and go through. And I think one of the things that helps this is the modern audience is a little bit more discerning with what they buy, especially when you have an audience now that isn't not reading comic books anymore. I mean, when you look at the manga fans who are reading these, they're reading those manga titles, but those manga titles all, unlike Detective Comics and Superman, they all have an endpoint. There's very few, you have your One Pieces and things like that. They carry on for a very long time. But again, those are all the original creator. They typically don't change who's writing or drawing it or anything like that. And that helps. Whereas, modern American comic books, we've had almost every character goes through 10, 20, 30 writers, 10, 20, 30 artists. And so there is something to this where if they actually stick to it, this could make this a unique sort of little pocket universe of books for people to pick up and enjoy long term. And so I can't say that I hate it on the surface. Yeah, now, if this does become something where, Ultimate Peter and Ultimate Black Panther and Ultimate Wolverine are all rolled into the main universe and become variants of the main characters in that universe, then it will become tired and stupid. And I hope we don't do that, the way they did to Miles Morales. And it's worked out for Miles because he was a unique character. Even though I'm not a huge fan of his, it has worked for that character. I think if we have a 35-year-old middle-aged Peter in the same universe as the main Peter, that's just going to be stupid. So I think there's actually something to this kind of wrapping up. I don't necessarily think it means they need to end the universe, but you could, as we've seen many, many times, just kind of give a definitive chapter and just kind of have where the to be continued kind of just exists in the headcanon of fans. So I think there's a lot of positives to it. It's the different approach from me on it, and I can't believe Marvel is actually going to end these, and that's the hardest part of it because it's selling pretty well. But I do think there are some good things to it. On the negative side, I think there is one negative that I will say to this, and I think it especially is with Ultimate Spider-Man. That book had so many issues that seemed to be world building, that seemed to be building things up so that you, as a reader, could have investment in the stakes. And if it's truly ending in 24 issues and that's it, it's not going to get picked up by another writer. It's not a reboot. It's not a pause. This is the end of this version of Peter Parker and these characters that are inhabiting his world. That does become a little more disappointing. I will say that, and that, if we were only getting 24 issues of this, the fact that we really only seem to be where we are with only 3 or 4 issues left, it's a little disappointing, and some of those issues become a little more redundant and kind of retroactively sort of make you scratch your head a little bit of why did we dedicate so much page time to this? Especially having, a book of Ultimate Spider-Man where I believe Peter has been absent for 5 or 6 issues, and it's only going to be 24 issues, meaning, a quarter of the time we didn't even have Peter Parker in the comic book. But I do think again that's the one negative of this. But I do think overall I can't turn this into a negative. I'm actually going to be more positive about this, and that I think letting these books end, we're always going to have the mainstream counterparts of this. And while I think Ultimate Spider-Man really for a while exposed how bad Amazing Spider-Man was, especially when it was the Zeb Wells run competing with what Hickman was doing. And I think similarly, Chris Condon's Ultimate Wolverine is really shining a light on where Wolverine is missing some of his, kind of edge in his comic books. I can't say that I hate the idea that these creatives got their chance. They got a chance to write the story they wanted to write. They got to bring it to an end. I think that's actually a good thing, especially for some of these pocket universes, as much as I would have liked to see them continue, and I wouldn't have been sad had they been announced. I think it's almost a better fate for these to naturally wrap up with their original writers who probably had a plan that they wanted to execute, and they get to end it as opposed to getting endlessly rebooted and taken over by creatives who come in and just sort of hit the reset button on everything and undo what's been done. But I'd be interested to see, what do you guys think down below? Do you think this is a good thing or a bad thing? I will actually say I think this ends up being if they stick to their guns on this and Marvel does in fact let this end, I actually admire what they're doing. And I think it's actually a smart decision, that as much as I would love more issues of these, I would love them to be what the writing and creative teams are doing now. And I don't think we would have got that had it continued much longer. So I will say I can't. I think this is, as much as it's a loss, it's also, I think, a win for Marvel, and maybe even a sign of growth in them making some good decisions. So I would actually applaud them for this, as sad as I'll be to see some of these books go. I think it is actually the right call. But let me know what you think down below. As always, agree or disagree, completely okay. If you think this is a stupid opinion by me on there, that's okay. Not here to get mad or engage or pretend I know better than you. Just wanted to share my opinion and hear what yours is as well. As always, thank you for watching, folks. God bless you. You have a great rest of your day.